Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
Arash Ayrom, Mike Pence, Rand Paul, Tina Peters, Jared Polis, and Barry Manilow. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. I'm Sam Bushman with another incredible edition of Liberty RoundTable Live on your radio and TV. You gotta dig it. Brought to you by me. That's right, just me. And syndicated by Loving Liberty Network, lovingliberty.net. Spread the word, show the love, would you please? Barry Manilow, quickly, I know they have the top of the hour news about him. He's had some lung cancer, recovering, looking forward to being back on stage. And I remember being about 17 years old. This is a long time ago now, folks, over 40 years ago. And I went to a Barry Manilow concert, and man, he was good. He was very good. I was really impressed, loved the show. So our prayers are with him and his family that he can get back on stage and that he can do what he does. And anyway, enough of that. Quick news before we bring on our incredible guest. Colorado Governor Jared Polis is considering commuting the sentence of Tina Peters. Yes, great news. Now, you know, she was the former county clerk in Colorado that said, hey, she wanted to dig into the elections. And so she, backed up the systems and did these things to preserve the data. They claim that she, fraudulently tampered with the machines. I personally disagree with that assessment. President Trump has been doing all that he can to encourage the governor to release her. It's a state issue, not a federal issue. And so President Trump doesn't have the authority in the state of Colorado, but he has moved the space program to Alabama, and he's put some pressure on the state of Colorado to make a difference here. Trump's done all that he can. Good for President Trump on that for sure. And look, the fact is, Peter's lawyer, the guy's name is Peter Tickton, I think is how you say it, anticipates a potential computation soon. And our prayers are that the grandmother, dear Tina Peters, gets released soon. Again, whether she did what they claim or not, that's one thing. We can debate that until the cows come home. But the fact is, in my opinion, at least, hey, she's never been a criminal in any way in her whole life. The extreme sentence that she got is really the problem. And I think even the governor of Colorado recognizing that. So our prayers are with Tina. Second quick, interesting story. Senate fails to pass war powers resolution, allowing Trump to retain full operational control over Operation Fury. Now, that's interesting. The Democrats and the Republicans, for the most part, voted along party lines. One Democrat voted, in favor. The other Democrat or the Republican voted no. So party lines, but one switched. The Republican went one way, the Democrat went the other way. The Republican that co-sponsored this and promoted this was Rand Paul. And so anyway, it got turned down. They're not going to rein in Trump. He's free to do what he thinks he needs to do. The House is expected to vote after the Senate failed to rein in Trump's war powers. Mike Pence is speaking out about this as well. And Mike Pence says history will record that Trump made the right call. So just wanted to give you some of those quick headlines before we talk to our esteemed guest. We've had him on before. His name is Arash Ayrom. He's an award-winning filmmaker. He's a film editor. He's a freedom advocate and more. Arash, welcome back to Liberty RoundTable Live, sir.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
You're very welcome. Let's talk about your story. I know we talked about it before, about a year and a half ago when you were on with us, but I want our listeners to get kind of a summation of who you are. You were born in Iran, right?
That's right. I was born there, and my family fled right before the so-called, Islamic Revolution in 1979. We fled with the shirts on our backs, and I do mean that pretty much literally. My dad sent my mom, my sister, and me out of the country. He was basically the commander of the anti-guerrilla forces, so he wanted to stay to basically fight, the incoming Islamic horde. And my mom, my sister, and I, we basically had to sleep in the airport in London. That's where we went to because that's where we had family. We didn't have visas or anything, so we had to sleep there until we could arrange for entry into England, into London.
So just
And
to be clear, you were
yeah,
able to stay at the airport, but you weren't able to clear customs or whatever they call that, and then go get with your family. Is that right?
we basically couldn't enter the country. We were in that like no man's zone where you're
I
sort of
see.
in like this
Okay.
holding pattern. Yeah, we had to sleep on those hard plastic seats, and
Oh,
for a few nights, and until we could figure things out. And then eventually my dad had to escape on a horse through the mountains into Turkey and join us like months
wow.
later. Yeah, and we
And how
lost
old were
touch
you
with
when
him.
this all went down?
I was 8, so I was pretty young. And
Yeah, you were young, but old enough to absolutely know and remember, though, right?
oh yeah, my memories are pretty vivid. Yeah, definitely. And
And was it
yeah.
scary?
It wasn't scary. I think my parents did a good job of sort of shielding us from the real scary bits of it, but it was certainly a strange time. Suddenly you're living your life, and the next moment, you know, everything is gone. You're in the middle of nowhere, and you have no idea what's really going to happen. So,
Yes.
and I think the thing that surprised me the most, one thing I learned from my parents years later, when we left, they thought that it was going to be temporary. We were going to be out of the country for a little bit until things settled down, and we were eventually going to return. And then here we are, 47 years later, and never been back because we can't go back. So
All right. So you went to England, is that right?
we went to England first because that was, where we had family, and it was
Sure.
sort of like the easiest thing. We were there just under a year. They wouldn't they wouldn't let us stay, and we got political asylum in the U.S. So
Okay.
we landed in Florida.
And what's your status now then?
I now live in Utah. We eventually left Florida, moved to
Okay. So you went to
California.
Florida first then,
Yeah, Florida
and then
first, Tampa,
California.
Florida,
Okay.
then
Go ahead.
California. That's where I went to high school, and then ended up living in Los Angeles for many years. Went to college there, and ended up staying there because that was my field. Working in the film and television industry. Los Angeles was the place to be. And then I moved to Utah right before COVID hit. Just lucky, thing that happened after California just became too tyrannical. Honestly, as somebody who has basically gone through what we've done, like the Second Amendment for me is one of the most important things in the world. And California, with its desperate desire to disarm people, that was just like the final straw for me. So I moved to a state that was definitely more two-way friendly, and I've
And
been
how
here
did you
ever
pick
since.
Utah, by the way?
Utah was I wanted to be close by. I wanted to be a place that had in a place that had seasons. It wasn't just sort of like this monotonous summertime like in California. I love the snow. I love winter. And the place that I'm in, in the Provo Orem area, had been listed on some, I can't remember what organization's list, but as like one of the best places to start a business. The regulations and everything were easy, taxes were low, things like that. So, I wanted to establish my business here.
I love it. Okay. So you have a Liberty view because you've seen kind of what it's like not to have Liberty. What was your first 8 years like in Iran? Was it pleasant before 79 happened?
Oh yeah, just like any other place, of course it has its problems and everything, but it was a peaceful place. It was a place that was fairly wealthy. People were well off. People had work. Nobody was starving. Sure, you had some, beggars and homeless people on the streets, but they weren't starving to death. I remember my parents on the weekends would make food and go take it around to, people who were, less fortunate than us. People were educated. The reforms that the Shah, the king of the country, had put into place over his time in the country had turned the country, you know, I guess 180 degrees. The previous dynasty at the end of the 19th century had run the country into the ground. It was a poor, horrible place. And, the Pahlavi dynasty, or the family that came in after them, turned the place completely around. Uh, of course, I was a young kid. Maybe some of the finer things about life and politics, weren't obvious to me. But I've
Yeah,
studied it.
but at least though, as a kid though, you remember it being a good life, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There were parks and there were family outings and picnics and stuff like any normal person, at least here in America, would understand and sympathize with. And one of the things I'd like to mention is that the school that I went to was largely attended by Americans who lived in Iran because their families worked there for American corporations. I grew up learning English as basically very close to my own native tongue. In fact, I think you speak English
Well,
much better than
your
my
English
my.
is perfect as a
Oh,
result. So,
thanks. Yeah, yeah,
all right,
exactly.
hang
But
tight. We're going to take a quick break, ladies and gentlemen. Arash Ayrom with me. And we're talking about his life in Iran, what changed in 79, how he got here, and most importantly, we'll get to what's happening now. You're watching Liberty Roundtable Live.
I believe there will come a time when we are all judged on whether or not we took a stand in defense of all life from the moment of conception until our last natural breath. As a teenager, I gave my first public speech in my church. My hand shook, my heart pounded. I thought to myself, I can't do this, but somehow I did, and because I wanted to talk about things that were important, I persisted. I chided my church as a senior in high school for not seeming to care about the not yet born, for looking the other way, and for not taking a stand on life. I will be in earnest. I will not equivocate, and I will not excuse. I will not retreat an inch, and I will be heard. One thing I promise you, I will always take a stand for life.
This is a battle between truth and deceit, a battle between forces that would enslave this country in darkness, and between a media that wants to present you with the truth. We are being censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth. 90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in fact.
TheEpochTimes.com.
Looking for an IT partner that truly understands your needs? Managed IT Services is the answer. We meet with you regularly to discuss your goals and form a tailored technology plan. Our customers have called us a trusted advisor who delivers. When it comes to IT, we do it all. Firewalls, cloud storage, server migration, and more. Say goodbye to long-term contracts and hello to a team that earns your business month after month. Call 801-706-6980 now and let Managed IT Services transform your IT experience.
Arash Ayrom with me, ladies and gentlemen. He had a great life in Iran. He had to leave in 79 at the tender age of 8 years old, but he has vivid memories. He eventually made his way to California and Utah and etc. We're grateful to have him in our state. He's an incredible filmmaker and more. So when you guys left, you thought it was going to be temporary, you mentioned, Arash, and I think that's important to understand. You thought you were going to go back, but you couldn't. Why?
My dad's affiliation, basically, he was basically, when everything went down in 1979, he was one of the most sought after people by the Islamic barbarians. Basically, they had his posters of him up on the walls, like help us find this man, on TV broadcasts and everything, trying to find him because he was basically the person in charge of, fighting like the guerrillas. That's what they were. They were guerrillas. And he was very dangerous to them. He was in charge of intelligence and he was in charge of all that stuff. So even after we left, they felt we were a danger. So even though, my dad has passed away, but even though that's the case, even if I were to go back right now, there's probably like a 50% chance that they would immediately grab me from the airport just because I'm his son. I'm nobody in that context, but that's
he was
the
a
danger.
freedom fighter and they hate it, so they're going to always keep an eye out for him. Okay.
Exactly.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's scary. So you had a great life in California and Florida and now in Utah. You were a filmmaker. You spent your time and enjoyed the blessings of America, but you've also kept kind of an eye on what's happening in Iran, right?
Definitely. Look, I think the one lesson that I always try to impart to, my fellow Americans today is we can lose liberty in an instant. It happens very, very quickly. The stuff that I'm seeing today in this country shocks me to my core. So, uh, you know, sorry, I don't want to get too sidetracked on going down like this doom and gloom kind of
No, don't
situation.
don't do that. But do kind of illustrate what you mean, though, because we in America, that's all we know, Arash. We don't have the experience you have, and that's why you're in charge of a program for the Loving Liberty Network called Ask an Immigrant, which we'll get to a little bit more in detail. But that's really these are the stories we're going to be talking about, right?
Yeah, well, hopefully. The parallels that I see, like I said, Iran was a prospering country. It was developing. Not all of it was perfect, but people were well off. They were comfortable. They were educated. They were well fed. They could travel anywhere in the world. Iranian passports were respected across the globe. You weren't looked at as, this cretin coming from this terroristic regime that, is the situation now. If you were an Iranian, you were well respected across the globe. So people were happy, they were comfortable. And yet, this virus, this mental virus, started spreading through the country that people were unhappy, that they were oppressed. And it definitely spread through college students, just like we see here with all these protests and stuff everywhere. It's through the universities, through the college students. And again, the other parallel that I want to point out is that everybody calls the events of 1979 the Islamic Revolution. It was an Islamic and communist revolution. It was this coalition of Islamists and communists together fighting to overthrow the country. And if you look at America today, I mean, I don't have to point it out to you. It's the exact same thing. Of course, after the revolution went through, the Islamists basically rounded up all of the communists and killed them or imprisoned them, and that's exactly what's, going to happen here once, not once, I definitely take that back, because we've got a big fight ahead of us. If that happens here, that's exactly what will happen.
We pray it's once, though, because we want freedom, right?
Absolutely. It's the single most valuable thing in the world. Yeah. I'm definitely not a doom and gloom kind of person, but we have to look at places like Iran today. Since the biggest situation right now, the reason that these protests started happening a couple of months ago and have been happening year over year for decades, ever since the theocracy took over in Iran, is because they've taken the country's wealth, which was extensive, and they've basically used it strictly to fund terroristic activities. They fund Hamas, they fund Hezbollah, and I'm not sure if the proof exists in a clear and concrete way, but if you ask me, they're also funding many, many groups here in America. And I don't mean sleeper cells and things like that. I mean university groups. I mean these activist groups.
Sure.
So, we can look at
Trump would make that same very point as well, and it's really been going on for 50 plus years, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
This is a thing that we have to contend with. We can't brush it, sweep it under the rug. It's a reality of life. War is terrible. War is a horrible thing. It should be a last resort. But here we are 50 years later, and it's still, nothing has happened. Every single day, the theocracy was getting closer and closer to developing nuclear weapons. This is the fact. We all know this. Despite all these people on the left chiming in that Iran isn't working on nuclear weapons. I mean, it's just such a laughable thing to say. The way they treat their own people. We know
that they're dangerous. We know that they are at one of the greatest terror regimes because of the leadership. And I think Americans don't really understand that because we've had peaceful lives our whole lives. We don't really realize the magnitude, right? I mean, is that a fair statement?
I believe so. You've been blessed to have, two oceans on, either side of you, giving you some natural protections from, imperialistic, desires of, your enemies. But we've had our share of 9/11 is I think a prime example. I mean, that was strictly a psychological
Oh yeah, and I
attack on
think
this
Americans
country.
had a little bit of an awakening then too. And so I don't mean to attack Americans like we're totally ignorant. I'm just saying it's really hard
Sure.
when you live a peaceful life to kind of understand some of these things. That's kind of really
Yeah,
where
I
I'm
agree.
going with this is I think that when we ask an immigrant or we ask people who have seen and lived and experienced some of the fears, some of the difficulties and some of the realities on the ground that we may not kind of understand, I
Yeah.
think it's really important for us to listen is why I'm saying this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one thought experiment I would ask, my fellow Americans to maybe sit down and maybe contemplate is, we of Iranian heritage, inside and outside the country, are asking a foreign power to come and attack our country. You have to be incredibly desperate to want that. I would ask my fellow Americans to try and think of a situation where they would want that. Think of how bad things have to get in America to want, I don't know, France or Canada to come and attack this country. It's it's
Really,
a
really
bizarre,
attack the leadership of this country that
of
would be
course.
really betraying the country is what people need to understand, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we can certainly put that on the question. And I believe that that is what President Trump is doing. I do believe that their desires are largely pure. I do believe they want to end the regime. I don't think this is an Iraq situation. I don't believe this is an Afghanistan or Syria situation whatsoever. Those parallels just aren't there.
And
Um,
when you say that, are you talking about the longevity or are you talking about the political circumstances? Help me understand.
Yeah, honestly, both. I was never a
Okay.
fan of the Bush presidents, either senior or junior. I don't believe the motivations there were pure or justified, and that's why I think we ended up in the quagmire that we did end up in. And I believe President Trump breaks the mold on leaders, on presidents. He's a completely different person. None of us ever know what he's actually thinking, what he's going to say, or what he's going to do. And but I think I've been pleasantly surprised that I've agreed with almost everything that he has done.
So
Certainly in
you're
this
saying your
situation.
knowledge of Iran and your knowledge of the desperate situation and your
Mhm.
knowledge of kind of what's transpired there and then what Trump's purporting doing, you're saying, hey, you believe that to be on the up and up and you believe that to be correct and that he has the right motivations.
I believe so. Look, I mean, that's
Okay.
going to be my position until I see evidence to the contrary. I mean, like we got some news yesterday that basically the Kurds in I believe it was Iraq were being armed as a counter force to the IRGC, the Islamic Republic's revolutionary force, the army there basically, and that definitely worries me. The Kurds have a strong separatist faction in them. Their desire is to carve up Iran, basically to take their own, independent little Kurdistan and create that, and that worries me. That would definitely affect the future of a free Iran. So I don't know what's really happening there, but I'm still going to try and maintain an optimistic, but maybe somewhat realistic view as well. So maybe that's what's necessary in order to ensure success.
All right, when we get back, I want to talk a little bit more about this because you mentioned a lot of the factions there.
Hmm.
And I think that that's a lot of the problem where there's a lot of confusion, especially when people like me and others aren't really familiar with the details of the factions and kind of who's who. Like, who are the Kurds in Iran, for example? Are they
Hmm.
there? Are they friendly? You know what? Anyway, I'm hoping that when we get back, you can break that down a little bit for us, too. In my mind, I'm just kind of taking the position right now that I need an education. I'm not familiar with a lot of these historical details and, who the good guys are. Sometimes it's very convoluted in many cases. But I'm hoping to get kind of an understanding of that. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about what Trump's doing and what needs to happen. Trump's basically saying, hey, the Iranians need to take action and free themselves. We'll talk about that too. Coming up with Arash on your radio and TV.
protecting your liberties. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
Breaking news this hour from Town Hall. I'm Rich Thomason. It is day 6 of the Iran war. Israel and Iran continue to trade missile fire, although the BBC's Yolande Nell in Jerusalem says Israel is hoping to see less of it.
The Israeli authorities have said that from today they're going to start easing the restrictions on the Israeli public that were introduced since Saturday, and saying that is due to the decline in incoming rocket fire from Iran. The Israeli military spokesman in his last briefing was really putting that decline down to the successful military operations to target Iranian missile storage sites and missile launch sites.
Israel's military says it is launching new strikes in Lebanon against the Iranian-backed Hezbollah terror group. President Trump says overall the war progressing very well. The Senate has rejected a Democratic attempt to stop the conflict.
Senate Republicans voted down a war powers resolution that would restrict President Trump's ability to continue major combat operations against Iran. The vote fell mostly along party lines. It was a sign of early GOP public support for a conflict that has rapidly spread across the Middle East. Democrats complain that the war is not justified and that there's no clear U.S. exit strategy. Greg Clugston, Washington.
Republicans are invoking the war as well as the prospect of retaliatory terrorist attacks as they tee up votes on a funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security. Democrats have been blocking funding for the department. No presidential endorsement yet in the Texas U.S. Senate runoff between Republican incumbent John Cornyn and challenger State Attorney General Ken Paxton. President Trump says that his endorsement will be coming soon. On Wall Street this morning, the Dow is down 268 points, while the Nasdaq is trading 57 points higher. More on these stories, townhall.com.
Have you noticed losing weight is harder than it used to be? You're eating better and exercising, but the scale barely moves? The real problem isn't willpower, it's metabolic dysfunction. And standard dieting just makes it worse. PhD Weight Loss has helped thousands fix the root cause of stubborn weight. Take their free metabolic assessment at fixmyweightloss.com. Fixmyweightloss.com. It's quick, personalized, and shows why your body is resisting weight loss so you know exactly what to fix. Visit fixmyweightloss.com. That's fixmyweightloss.com.
Hey, I'm Mike Slater. My dad passed away at the age of 63. It's out of nowhere. Had a stroke. Super hard, obviously, for the whole family, but my dad had life insurance. This is why I have life insurance for my family, for my wife and 4 kids. And the best place to get life insurance is ethos.com, because you can do it in 10 minutes. And there's no medical exam and no blood test, just a few health questions. Get life insurance in 10 minutes so your family is protected. Ethos, E-T-H-O-S, ethos.com/Mike.
Have you ever had great honey? No, I mean really good, all-natural, raw honey? Well, now you can, thanks to localhoneyman.com. We can ship out our locally made honey all across the U.S. So don't worry, you won't miss out. Plus, Local Honeyman has so many different flavors, like Utah Wildflower, High Desert Delight, Happy Valley, and Blackberry, just to name a few. So purchase your delicious raw honey today at localhoneyman.com.
As you are aware, America is divided over every fault line possible. This is intentionally fostered by those who do not love God, family, or country. We believe a peaceful future as a free people absolutely depends on civility. Clarion Call for Civility is looking for funding and volunteers at every level to make our hopes and efforts a reality. Please donate, sign our pledge, and help us in our sacred cause. Please visit callforcivility.com for more details. Callforcivility.com.
As a parent, is receiving a faith-based, character-focused education for your children difficult to find? Do you believe that godly principles should be a central component in your child's education? Imagine a school where faith and integrity are at its center, where heritage and responsibility instill character. For over 40 years, American Heritage School has been educating both hearts and minds, bringing out academic excellence. This is the school where character and embracing the providence of a living God are fundamental, where students' national test scores average near the 90th percentile. With American Heritage School's Advanced Distance Education Program, distance is no longer an issue. With an accredited LDS-oriented curriculum from kindergarten through 12th grade, your children can attend from anywhere in the world. American Heritage School will prepare your child for more than a job, It will prepare them for life. To learn more, visit American-Heritage.org. That's American-Heritage.org.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, my guest is Arash Ayrom, and he's breaking down kind of the details in Iran of kind of on the ground who's who are the Kurds, etc. Arash?
Yeah. Hi there. Should I jump right into it?
Please. Yes, sir.
Yeah. The situation in Iran, it's actually historical. It's been going on for, much of, at least most of the 20th century. We do have a large clannish structure in Iran. There's a lot of clans that draw these arbitrary boundaries, honestly, throughout the country. And they were a big thorn in the side of the country, before 1979, before the Islamic Revolution. And they've often been a vector to be exploited by foreign powers if they wanted to, try and, take over the country, exploit our resources, things like that. They'd go and, sort of make a partnership with one of these clans, promise them all sorts of things if they agree to, engage in destructive activities. And then, it's been a long running problem. I don't want to necessarily put that same thing on the Kurds. I think the Kurds are generally a long suffering people. I think they're generally a good people. I think it would be nice to see them get a decent dose of independence for themselves and see their culture thrive and thrive. But I don't think it should be at the expense of the territorial integrity of Iran, basically. But right now, they are a pretty cohesive group, and they do sort of occupy this region between Iran and Iraq, and that region. They sort of spill into Turkey a little bit as well and into Syria. And the Syrians have been pretty cruel to them, especially with the incoming regime there. So I think that makes them a little bit desperate and a little bit easy to exploit. And I hope that's not the case. I hope they're seeing Iran as an ally for the future, and that they're going to engage in activities that way. But basically the future of Iran lies in us deciding our own fate. Right now,
when you say us, you mean the Iranian people, right?
The Iranian people, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yes.
Sorry, I being an immigrant, having a foot in two countries, basically. Sometimes I, have to use the pronouns interchangeably like that.
No, you're perfect. From an American point of view, what we want to do is make it possible for the Iranian people to decide their future, right?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
I hope so. That's my genuine desire. But in the past, that hasn't always been the case.
Sure.
So, I hope that is the path that we see towards the future. I think the big picture that I would ask, anybody watching the show to consider is the bigger picture of what this action, this war, whatever you want to call it, represents. Imagine having a country like Iran being the ally of the West and America in its current location in the Middle East, like we were before 1979, like we were for most of the 20th century. It will be such a boon to civilization, to Western ideals, to the economy. Just think of the riches that Iran has, the opportunities that lie there. It'll be a domino effect. It'll bring peace and prosperity to a region, and then to the rest of the world. That's the big picture that I would ask people to just keep in mind every time they hear some new bit of news about what's happening over there right now, and think about if somebody's going against it, speaking out against it, why are they saying it, and who's actually benefiting from that? So right now, the situation is still tentative. We still got a long way to go. If we do get the opportunity to decide our own fate, the son of the previous Shah, Reza Pahlavi, is currently the favorite to come in and, take us through this transitional period. And that's what he said. He's always said that
favorite, are you talking about the Iranian people's favorite?
Certainly the Iranian people's favorite, but
Okay.
he certainly has a lot of support in Europe and in America as well.
Got it.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, it's not everybody, but certainly the vast majority. Every time you see these rallies in the big cities, every time with people flying the Iranian flag, the old Iranian flag with the sun and lion on it, they all want Reza Pahlavi. All the messages we're getting out of inside Iran are people wanting Reza Pahlavi back because they know that we made a big mistake in 1979. They know this, and they want to go back to the way things were. Of course, we never will be able to do that, but we're going to try and get as close as we possibly can. So Reza Pahlavi has said over and over again that he is not interested in going in and becoming the new monarch, the new king, the new Shah. He wants to serve at the pleasure of the people, to serve as a transitional leader until we decide what we want, until we write our new constitution, until we decide what system of government that we want.
And
He's been doing this.
I would say
Yeah.
that's admirable or admirable to say the least. I mean, for a guy to say, "Hey, I just want to help with the transition, but I want the people to decide," that is a rarity, sir.
It is. And, we have to take him at his word that he's never shown any sort of belligerence or aggressive behavior and wanting to, go in and take over and be like the strongman kind of, leader that we've seen in, other countries, even in our own history. So we're taking him at his word. He's never been that type of a personality. He has a lot of opposition. And I think the main opposition group right now, and I believe this is completely artificial, is this group called the MEK. MEK stands for Mujahideen Khalq. Khalq is written with a K, so it's MEK. And they're a group that's been around since the 60s in Iran. And they're an Islamic communist group. And that should, ring some alarm bells, because that's exactly what we're fighting to get rid of. No, very few Iranians actually support them. When the Iran-Iraq war happened, right after the revolution in 1979, and in 1980, Saddam Hussein, attacked Iran, the MEK basically helped Saddam Hussein fight Iran. So they were basically responsible for the deaths of thousands upon thousands of young Iranians. So they have very little support in Iran, but for whatever reason, they're getting a lot of financial support from foreign governments. And, and I really hate to mention these names here on the air, but they've got people like Rudy Giuliani and even Mike Pence advocating for MEK, for the MEK group to come in and take over the leadership of Iran. And that's going to be a disaster. That's how we get into an Iraq, Afghanistan type quagmire, if we even remotely allow MEK anywhere near Iran. So that's a thing that we're struggling with right now.
And that's a danger you're saying we need to watch for.
Absolutely. And, I think, like you said, Sam, I think, and I don't blame Americans for not being aware of some of these like smaller details and what we're dealing with, but I see their representatives on like Fox News all the time. And we shouldn't be seeing that whatsoever. I mean, of course, we want to hear different viewpoints and things like that, but they're bringing on these representatives of this. Most people believe them to be a cult, and they really do behave in cult-like fashion. On at least two separate occasions, members of the MEK have set themselves on fire as protest. To have that mindset that I am going to go, douse myself in gasoline and set myself on fire for some political action, from some political message. I mean, that is just insane. We don't want that. The world doesn't need that,
right? I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, absolutely. You have to have brainwashed, your people to a considerable degree to get somebody to do that. So we don't want that by any degree. So I hope that people like Giuliani and Pence reconsider their support for MEK.
Now let's talk about President Trump a little bit, because does he understand it? Do you think he knows the factions well enough? Because I know that I certainly don't. Right? Do you think he knows who's who and what's what? And I mean, if we want freedom for the Iraqi people, and if we want stability in the region, I mean that's what President Trump is aiming for, from what I understand it to be. Do you think he's got these factions down where he realizes who's who?
I believe so. I think he's surrounded by very smart people. Marco Rubio has been very, very impressive. I've become a big fan of that guy. Rubio has just been solid, and I think President Trump trusts him and depends on him. So I think we're in safe hands. I think President Trump is very, very good at not necessarily saying everything that's actually going on in his mind, what he's actually thinking. He likes to throw these weird little, things out there for people to, go chasing after so he can do what he needs to do.
Part of his negotiation tactics, right? I mean, it's his strategy.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm confident that that is the case, but until we see otherwise, that's going to be my position on that.
Sure. So let me understand this then. You mentioned other countries' influence on Iraq and making promises to certain factions, and they kind of lead Iraq in ways that, Iran in ways that you would not be happy with or whatever. Let me ask you this. Is that what's changed? Is that why Trump sees this as a great, got to do something now because something's changed? Or is it?
Yeah, I believe so. President Trump has certainly been aggressive towards China, which I believe is the absolute right way to go. I believe that's the right position. Several years ago, China made this giant deal with the theocracy in Iran. I mean, this was like a multi-trillion-dollar deal to basically buy the country. I mean, the mullahs in Iran have no regard for Iran as a country, for the people, for its culture, for its history. They'll sell everything off to the highest bidder, no problem. And China was the highest bidder. So, and if China gets a foothold within Iran, just think of the strategic positioning an advantage that it would give them. Its proximity to Europe, its proximity to the Persian Gulf, all that stuff, oil, energy. These are big
control of
things.
Certain trade lines or trade ways, right?
Oh, absolutely. This was when it happened, when this deal was struck, and I believe it was during President Biden's term in office. I was just dumbstruck that we allowed it to happen, and I do believe President Trump's course of action now is a corrective. He's trying to counter that. And, just as a reminder to people who, I know we all have short attention spans thanks to social media and the news cycle, but in President Trump's first term, and I remember this clearly because it was the day that I was actually driving my moving truck from Los Angeles to Utah. And that was the day that I was moving. President Trump struck and took out Qasem Soleimani. He was the top general purveyor of terror in Iran. So this isn't something that's happening now. This isn't something that he just did on a whim. This was in his first term in 2020 that he started this campaign of removing the regime. Soleimani was evil incarnate. The terror and the brutality that he engineered against the Iranian people within the country is unparalleled. It's once we gain our freedom, once we're actually able to find the records and bring the truth to light, it will shock the world. It will shock the world to, in very uncomfortable ways. So, this isn't a new thing for President Trump. I do believe this is something that he's been thinking about for a long time, and I'm glad he's taken it up on himself, fairly early in his, second term.
Tell me how last June in 2025 kind of affects this, because I thought we got rid of their ability to create nukes and do some of those things then. Was that just the tip of the iceberg? I mean, hey, it needed to happen, you could say, but yet we needed to do more. Is this a finishing of the project? Give me kind of an understanding.
I believe so. I think it was a demonstration of the ability to go in and strike without, a ground invasion, boots on the ground, that whole thing. It was surgical. It was clean. It was very well executed. And look, when they, last weekend, when they went and struck and took out, quote unquote, supreme leader Khamenei and his, people around him, that was a master stroke. People really aren't talking about that enough. And whether we had the help of the Israelis or not is completely irrelevant. The fact that this happened after 47 years in such a clean, beautiful way is something to be celebrated. This is something that we should all, I swear, as a country, as a united country, be celebrating. This shouldn't be a place to divide us. This should be a place to unite us. So,
and
yes.
Because you're saying that, hey, strong men tied with hostile countries with an effort bent on terror, hey, this is a blow against that whole apparatus. Is that fair to say?
Oh, 100%. Hamas has lost its major source of funding. Hezbollah has lost its major source of funding. It's why we're seeing in Lebanon, the government there has finally stood up to Hezbollah after all these years. Now suddenly they're standing up to Hezbollah. So when this happens, I mean, think of the outcome. Think of what that means if we're removing these big sources of terror around the world. How can we possibly look at this as a bad thing? Unless you're also losing a paycheck, honestly. I don't know how else to say this. So
that's right. Unless you're on the take, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think everybody necessarily is, but I think a lot of people are, more than maybe we realize. So
now this has really divided a lot of the MAGA people, or whatever you want to say, Trump supporters. Some are for it, some are against it. And I think what we look at is, hey, if it's constitutional, we're for it. And if it's not, we don't like it. Others say, you know what, Sam, we agree with that. However, this is too important. This is too critical. The whole world's peace, if you will, depends on it. If, say, China controls Iran 100%, I mean, we lose too much. We can't let that happen. I'm not really wanting to focus on the divide there as much as help us understand that in a kind of maybe a uniting way, a way that would say, you know what, you see both because you're an immigrant, you understand America, you understand what's at stake. Help me with that.
I'll try to. I absolutely believe, arguments about the Constitution and powers and government, expanding is a very valid point of discussion. It really is. But I also think that we need to pick, the right time to have these discussions. This stuff, government has been expanding forever. We're at a point right now where we're dealing with something critical to the stability of the world, to prosperity, to freedom for an entire group of people. Iran is 90 million people. It's doubled its size since, I left. That's what we're talking about. So this isn't Iraq, it's not Libya, it's not Afghanistan. I understand the parallels there, but it just isn't. Right now, we have the opportunity to do something great. And we need to put aside our political differences. The more united that we are, the cleaner and easier doing this job will be. Division right now is just going to make this worse. It's not going to help. Let's table this conversation. I know I'm very biased. I obviously have a, stake in this game, but I certainly hope we can put aside some of the division, some of the argument, until this job is done, and then we can look at it and go, is this possible? I'd remind people watching and listening that we have had success in changing the course of countries in the past. South Korea being, I think, the best example. Look at it now. It's prospering. It's one of the foremost economic powerhouses in the world. Technology, culture, all of it. So it's not
become
that
a great partner too.
Absolutely.
That's what you're hoping out of Iran, right?
Of course. We want the best. None of us, I don't want to see destruction. I don't want to see lives lost. Honestly, I hate celebrating death and destruction. But that's where we're at. That's how desperate we are. And I do believe that sometimes the cost is just simply going to be something that we have to bear. I can't say if it's going to be worth it or not. That's not something that I can state outright. But I do believe that sometimes we have to. It's not a perfect world, and we have to take on these tasks and these actions for the future.
But we can say it's an opportunity, though. I mean, we can say that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I believe so. I think if we can somehow distance ourselves a little bit from the subjective and look at it objectively, and look at a map and look at a globe and look at where Iran is, go look at some books and history and videos of what Iran was like before 1979. Look at its relationship with the United States back then. We can have that again. We certainly can. It's not guaranteed. It's not fait accompli by any stretch of the imagination, but it's something that we can work towards. And if it happens, it will be a blessing. It will bring peace, stability, economic prosperity, everything. I honestly can't think of a better win for the world than what this action represents.
Well, and we can, and I hope we will hope and pray and, for peace, for stability, for safety, for every country in the world, but specifically Iran right now, and saying, hey, you know what? I hope they get freedom and stability in their country. That'll be making Iran great again, right?
It certainly would. And, I think that once we're at that position, I would encourage every single person listening and watching to come and visit. Come visit Iran. I mean, I'm saying come. I'm in Utah, but I certainly plan to visit myself. I think they will be struck by the warmth of the people, the history and the culture that they witness. I think our food is amazing. It'll be, I don't know. It'll be a wonderful, beautiful thing in every possible way. So
we're about out of time. We're running out of time way faster than I want to. I've asked a lot of questions to try to educate myself, Arash. But tell me, what have I overlooked that you think people just need to know?
Let me think. I think, and I've said this several times, and I do think it's worth restating. We're a completely different people, a different culture than the other, quagmires that we've certainly witnessed in the past. We're not Arabs, we're Persians. We're a completely different culture, different language, different ethnicity than our neighbors. We love the West. Iranians have a big love for everything Western, not just culture, but philosophy and, all of it. So we're not combative in that sense. Our entire history is poetry and literature and art and music, things of that nature. We're only Islamic because of conquest. We're not Islamic because that's our native religion. This is a chance for really resetting the history and the clock on the country, on the region. I couldn't be more, vocal, enthusiastic about what's happening right now with all the dangers and all the obstacles that we still have to contend with.
Arash Ayrom, everybody. He's a filmmaker. By the way, you're working on a bunch of projects. You want to highlight those real quick?
Sure. The biggest one, yes, Sam, as you mentioned, is for, through Loving Liberty. We've got a project called Ask an Immigrant that we're going to be launching shortly. And it's talking to immigrants in America who came here the right way and who have a love for this country to tell us why this country is so great, to not only remind Americans about what this country represents and the role that it plays on the global stage, but also for us to understand immigrants themselves. I think we're at a time right now where we're being divided on this question of immigration. We've got one side advocating for complete immigration, but we want, to reform the process so that it's clean and understandable.
Amen to all that. We certainly want to learn about them, their cultures, their foods, their lives, their circumstances, their stories. Just riveting stuff. Ask an Immigrant. Keep an eye on Loving Liberty for that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sam Bushman. My guest, Arash Ayrom, doing a great job helping us kind of understand what's at stake and what's really going on in Iran. It's something that Americans, I don't think, understand. I know that I don't understand enough of it. So I want to learn, and I hope that education makes sense for everyone. It's really important to understand people, not just topics. People are what matter. I'm Sam Bushman. Thanks for watching. We are syndicated by lovingliberty.net. Spread the word, show the love, and God save the Republic of the United States of America and freedom for Iran.